So, you're like, well, how do we make sure there's working capital that, that can save the industry to an extent? And people have to be more disciplined about what we're doing, and they have to make sure that we're, as like an installer or a sales org and finance companies, we just have to be more conservative about what we're doing and not grow just for the sake of growth.
Get him in the room. Let's go.
There he is.
Waiting for this guy. Get on the podcast for a long time. Here he is, Mr. Scott Hyde. If you guys don't know, he's the CEO of Sunobi and the CEO of Coda Energy Group in California. Scott, thanks so much for making some time to be with us, man.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you having me on.
Well, this is the SolarPulse Podcast with Josh and Joe. Do you know Josh?
Hold on,
I
Scott.
don't, not yet.
Well,
Hey,
we'll get
Josh.
to know him today, man. We'll get to know you too. And I know you a little bit here. I know you for a few years. You're probably one of the most knowledgeable people I know in the solar industry. I was telling Josh before, like when it comes to the install side, the software side, the future of solar, just knowledgeable all parts of solar. Like, you're one of those guys. So I really want to try to pick your mind today, if that's cool with you.
Yeah, I think that maybe the more accurate way of saying it is I'm very opinionated. Doesn't necessarily mean I'm right, but I have a lot of opinions.
That's a good way to say it. But obviously, you definitely have a good perspective, and I'd love to always hear your side of things. So, before I get into it, a lot of people still don't know who you are. Some people out there might not know Scott Hyde. And I know you have a huge background from the solar install side to the software side. Can you just let the audience know a little bit how you got into solar with the Coda, Coda Energy, and I know before that you were doing solar too. So a little bit about your beginnings.
Yeah, I think I followed a path that was similar to a lot of people. I was a door-to-door rep selling alarms and security through a company called Pinnacle, which got purchased by Protection One. At
That's
the time,
back in the day. This was what,
Yeah,
16,
I was,
17 years ago?
yeah, I was. I never was a guy who did summer model stuff. I was always just a year-round guy.
Yeah.
And I was in Seattle at the time, and so I sold door to door in Seattle and got rained on constantly. And when Protection One purchased Pinnacle, they created a program they called the Red Branches, basically. And so if there was an existing branch, like a brick and mortar building, they wanted someone from Pinnacle's sales side to go in there and kind of be the head of sales for that local region and that warehouse. And so I was one of the first 10 guys to do that. And we were trying to merge these cultures of a company that was very used to going very, very deep with its customer base and reselling products over and over and over again to the same customers, where, the door-to-door industry kind of sells one product one time to one customer. And so they go really, really wide. And so they were like, is there a way to bridge this gap? And it was a culture clash. It was tough. So when Protection One opened a solar branch called Bright Energy in 2013, 2014, I was one of the first few guys to go out there to San Diego and sell solar there. And it was
from where? You said go to San Diego. Where did you come from?
It was, my first area was Lakeside, California, down in, kind of East San Diego, Southeast San Diego.
Oh, okay.
And, it was a really interesting time there. We could only sell leases. We were through SunEdison, and we sold SunEdison leases. The model was very different. We sold site surveys instead of sales. And so we had to do a site survey first before we ever could close a deal. Like we had same day and next day site surveys is effectively what we sold. And then we'd wait a week or 2 weeks to go back and close the client because they'd done like a SunEye report and, all that stuff. And so we had like really accurate designs, but it was a model that was very different than what it's evolved into and where it's come from. But I see so many kind of underpinnings of what happened from alarms and how that business was built and created, that industry, and what's transferred over to solar, at least on the door-to-door side. Mm-hmm. And, what happened was Bright Energy got dissolved because Protection One was purchased in a merger with ADT, and they let go of the solar space, which if you kind of fast forward a decade plus, it's interesting to see ADT buy another company and then go BK on it. And
real quick,
those same people, the same people who were at the beginning of Bright Energy were the same folks that were running the ADT solar side.
that whole thing doesn't make sense to me at all, but that's a whole nother subject. Go ahead.
I'm happy to get into it if you want. I think I got anyway.
$1 billion they bought it and they go bankrupt. Like what? Like this is insane. How does that even happen? That's crazy to me.
Yeah, it was $800 million, and it's mostly a stock transfer. So the guys at SunPro in Tennessee basically got stock at ADT rather than cash. ADT ironically dumped in another $200 or $300 million into the business. So in all reality, it cost ADT over $1 billion, but they probably put in $200 or $300 million in cash. And I think that, like many companies that have tried to make the leap from being an installation company of one product, like smart homes or HVAC or roofing or whatever, it's ends up becoming fairly difficult to do both with the same group of people, or at least with the same business practices. And I think that's what happened to ADT is SunPro was from all appearances, looked like it was a fairly profitable and well done business. It was also unique in that it was W2, right? And so, like its complete construction of that business and architecture was different than what the vast majority of the space is today. So it's, it was I don't know. There's a lot of things about that.
Were they just a glorified dealer though? SunPro, they weren't really vertically integrated in all their states.
No, they were.
So they were.
Yeah, they had install teams and sales orgs and stuff that were all vertically integrated. They were a unique organization in the space because they were W2 and they were vertically integrated. But ADT's model hasn't really been like ADT's built on a dealer model.
Yeah.
And so it's just if you're going to go that route and change from a W2 where you pay your sales guys objectively less money per deal to a dealer model, your margins, get shrunk as well. So you have to be very, very good at your job. And if you stub your toe a few times, it's not great.
What was the asset they were buying there? Were there the installation infrastructure or the sales?
Oh, definitely installation. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what the exact number of locations there were, but I think that there's this again, as I said at the beginning, I'm probably more opinionated than I'm right a lot of times, but I don't think that the sales org has a lot of intrinsic value by itself, mainly because they're 1099 contractors, right? So a good rule of thumb is to say that a sales org is probably worth about 10 grand a head. That's about the value of a sales org. That's at least if someone's going to buy it, because you're buying transactions.
I think that's way too much. Way too much. You get a dealer that has 100 salespeople and you're paying $1 million for that? No way. 100 salespeople. In Australia, we had the same issue. It's like everyone was W2, W9, the equivalent, and people started trying to add value to large sales teams in solar that were all contractors that were in and out. And whenever there was a merger, it never worked. The cultures clashed, or the sales guys left, or the results went down, or the management, it never worked because all the sales guys think they're their own business. So if it's W2, I guess it's a bit different. But did you say that they converted everyone to a W9 when they went over to ADT?
No. SunPro already was a W2, or in your case, W9 company. And part of what the ADT smart home is not that way. For the most part, right. It doesn't mean they don't have them, but for the most part, their growth has been based on a dealer type of model. Outside sales orgs that are selling ADT as a name, but they're not owned by those, they're its own sales org. So I think that, the industry has signaled time and time again that it's not very interested in buying sales only companies. The very first company that we saw that was like that had probably a chance to maybe set a benchmark for it was when Legacy was almost purchased by Sunrun. And at the time they were exclusive to Sunrun, and a deal was made or was offered, and this is again outside information, so I don't know, I could be wrong on this, and so Luke and Doug, as you hear this, you're probably like, you're an idiot, you know what you're talking about, and I'll guarantee you that I'm missing a lot of details. But my understanding of it was that Sunrun made an offer that was not appealing enough for legacy guys to take it, and they decided not to. And then their contract, essentially exclusivity, expired and allowed them to go start becoming a dealer of multiple installers. Then their evolution was to become an installer themselves. That process is what created the division between, again, to my understanding, is the division between Legacy and Sunder. What eventually became Sunder. Some of those executives were like, I think I want to control my destiny maybe more than what I thought I was at. And they, and again, I probably shouldn't even speak to it. I hope I'm, for anyone who is of that inside information, please forgive me if I'm making a mistake on it. That's my understanding of it. But the principle I'm trying to make is I don't think the sales org, I think that Legacy probably could have set a benchmark or a comp in the market for what a sales org was worth. But when they didn't take it, as one of the more successful sales orgs in solar, at a minimum, it signaled that. And then Sunrun still grew and Legacy grew, and it was fine. So there's not a lot of intrinsic value or corporate value in a sales org by itself, because it's so transactional, especially in solar, that it's just a very singular transaction that happens.
I don't feel like the US is, maybe since 2023 has happened, it's a bit more apparent, but my whole time here compared to the Australian market, I've found that no one really understands the value of the installation infrastructure, and it's still focused on sales. And I think that's a big indication that the market is still so immature. Now, because 2023 happened and we had that dip, maybe that's coming into play now, and they're like, oh shit, there's less installers out there that aren't complete garbage. Maybe we should start picking this up. So, with the big names that have fallen recently, I'm sure a few guys have gone in and said, I'm going to pick up all of that installation infrastructure. But like in Australia, it was absolutely brutal at times trying to find installers that either weren't completely and utterly price gouging or just straight up stealing your equipment as soon as it gets thrown onto the customer's front yard. And I haven't felt that in the US. I feel everyone's still on the sales, and there still has been, again, up until recent times, installers everywhere.
Yeah, I'm curious. I mean, Australia and Europe are certainly ahead of the curve in terms of at least adoption for solar. And I'm curious, in your experience there in Australia, how did installers and sales orgs fund their growth?
Fund their growth. Well, so I started right at the end.
How do they get operating capital or working capital? Where do they get it from? They bootstrap it? Are they getting loans from banks? Like, what were they doing?
We all bootstrapped it because when we got in 2014, 15, and that was still early days. And so I ran an EPC. We scaled it nationally, 100% bootstrapped. I know a few of my colleagues built that up 100% bootstrapped, from my understanding. When funding and capital actually started coming in was a bit later on, when the big companies, especially from India, came in and grabbed a bunch of market share. But on the core level, we all came from the same three companies, made a ton of money doing sales, and then bootstrapped up to national scale. I didn't know anyone.
Sorry, when you say that capital did come, at what point did the capital come to you as an EPC? Were you able to raise capital?
No, we never tried. We were bootstrapped and we were good to go. Yeah. Capital came, I would say, when I started seeing it becoming more corporatized, I guess I would say, because again, all the EPCs that scaled came from the cowboy phase that I started in, and we had all bootstrapped and we were fine as long as our credit on suppliers were good, as long as finance companies weren't delaying payments. Like, we really didn't have any issues because sales was our thing. So we had absolutely no lack of sales. Keep in mind, Australia install timeframes are, you can get an install done within a few days to a week, right? And settlement comes first panel on roof. So cash flow is less of an issue in the US, in Australia. And because sales were coming in left, right, and center, we had finance providers. We knew personally the CEOs of every single finance provider, and suppliers were begging to work with us and giving us ridiculously long terms. The US, when you have 2, 3, 4 month installs and finance providers really couldn't give a crap, cash flow becomes a bit more of an issue. So I don't think
Yeah,
capital was needed.
The reason why I asked that is because 2023 was like a really big magnifying glass on the warts in the industry. And it started long before then, but because lenders changed things so rapidly, it exposed all the weaknesses and the chinks in the armor in solar. And I think that the industry today spends so much time pointing the finger at lots of symptoms and not really the root cause. Like I can't tell you how many times I'm in a conversation and someone says the sales guys are all dishonest. Sales guys are all bad people. The sales guys are to blame. And then they'll give you some anecdotal evidence of a sales guy they know that did something wrong, or point to a news article or and that's an easy find. Like everyone knows someone like that, but that doesn't mean that the sales group as a whole is terrible. And then other guys will say, well, the reason why the industry is all broken is because the EPCs aren't very mature. Installers don't know what they're doing. They make too many mistakes. They don't really know their cost structure. That's weak, and they install without permits, or they talk about all these things that installers are doing that are wrong and blaming them for the problems. And then you can point to finance companies that go, well, the finance companies really screwed everybody over because they issued these M1s and they did and they pulled them back and changed the milestones and when they were going to collect or dish out payments and for PTO things, and that's all true as well, but it doesn't mean everybody's bad. And so those are all symptoms, in my opinion. And I think that the real root cause of what's wrong with solar today is there isn't any working capital. The working capital problem means that everything that we just talked about, all three of those categories, and we could throw in distribution in that as well, but all those categories are all trying to find a way to support an industry that's growing, and the government has asked it to grow. They've put incentives in place to grow, and they're all trying to figure out a way to do it. But because there isn't working capital, people make shortcuts all the time to save themselves. So we'll start with the one that everyone points out first, right? The sales guy, they say, is all dishonest. Well, having been a sales guy, I can tell you that part of the reason why a sales guy is tempted by that is because the industry is a very unsafe place. You can sell deals and you don't know if the installers can be in business. You can sell deals and not sure if the finance company is going to fund that deal later after you sold it. And you can also work within a system that, for the most part, the tech that exists in the space allows a rep to be as dishonest as they want to be. There's not a lot of guardrails in place that help a rep stay safe. And so you're asking someone to govern themselves. That's not it's not a very well done model. Like there isn't a single country in the world without laws that governs itself by themselves. For the most part, everyone needs some laws and rules to govern themselves. You look at an installer and there's not enough working capital, and the installer then goes, well, I wish I could raise my pricing, my red lines, but I'm so afraid I'm not going to have any volume that I have to give the sales guys whatever they ask for because I feel like I need to have at least some volume, some money to keep the lights going. And they're trying as hard as they can to make it work with super slim margins, and they need to actually just be a little bit rougher with the salespeople and say, I'm gonna hold the line on this. But then they start offering things that they really shouldn't be offering. Like, let's give 25-year warranties to everything across the board without really holding anything back in savings for the warranty claims that come up and the work that has to be done. And they don't set aside any of their profit for that because they don't have any to set aside anyway. There's not enough margin for them to do it. And the lenders are like, we got to get more volume going in because I got to feed this beast of raising capital on Wall Street. And over the last couple of years, the interest rates go up so much that the money they're borrowing is no longer effective. And so every single loan that's been sold, 2 weeks ago after the rates change is now a toxic asset, and they got to figure out how to get rid of that. So, you're like, well, how do we make sure there's working capital that, that can save the industry to an extent? And people have to be more disciplined about what we're doing, and they have to make sure that we're, as like an installer or a sales org and finance companies, we just have to be more conservative about what we're doing and not grow just for the sake of growth. We have to grow in real profit and have to understand what the actual definitions of things like economy of scale mean. People don't quite understand what that means. I think they've got the wrong definition for it. But the industry, I think, is suffering from that particular problem, is operating capital, working capital. So when you tell me that you're getting installs done inside of a week everywhere in the nation in Australia, I mean, I think that would happen in the United States, we wouldn't be going through the same issue, because you would then be running a business much like an alarm business ran, even though the scale is different in terms of cost, but operationally you'd be installing within a week, and your cash flow burn, is fixed quickly. But if you're asking guys to wait 3 to 6 months to get paid and cash flow that whole thing until there's a slim margin at the end, I mean, people have to be damn near perfect. And if the economic conditions change even slightly and someone stubs their toe, I mean, you're asking for a miracle for someone to stay in business as an installer.
Yeah.
That's
in Australia, we have a 10 business day cooling off period, right? So the equivalent of a 3-day precision in the US. And that was all for unsolicited sales. So door knocking and cold calling. When I got in, that's all we did. We all built off of door knocking and cold calling. And in 2016 or 17, we started running solar ads on Facebook. And in Australia, that was considered solicited because they had gone inbound. And we were the first ones to have ever run a solar ad in the industry. So we went to the finance providers and said, hey, this is inbound. They've asked us, and this falls into Australian law as solicited. So can we remove the 10 business day cooling off period? Because traditionally, if you got an install done within 10 business days, their systems would flag and go, what's going on here? We're not settling this. So we met with all the higher ups of every finance company in Australia, and they explained, and they're like, what the hell is this? What are you doing? What do you mean ads online? This is 2016, right? Facebook had just launched their advertising platforms. And then we got the green light, and they're like, by the way, no one's done this in the entire country. So you're the only ones that do this. So for about 7-8 month period, we were getting installs done in my quickest was 1 day. And everyone on the outside was like, how the hell are you getting installs done so quickly? And even, 10 business days. So like 2-3 weeks was the average, right? Not 2-3 months. We were getting done 3, 4, 5, 6 days. And then everyone else figured it out. And then, it took off from there. But it's definitely a game changer in terms of cash flow. Yeah. I think in the US though, other than software, I really don't feel that the industry is mature enough to get substantial outside capital. I would expect to wait until the vertical integration has become the norm and there's no such thing as an EPC or dealer anymore. That's old school structure, right? I would expect, again, other than software, if outside capital comes in, it's because this installation infrastructure is sweet, but they have an in-house sales team, or this sales team's great and they actually own the installation process. But it would be sketchy to put money into a, like we said, sales team. Well, that's, all W-9s, or installation infrastructure that's heavily reliant on a bunch of dealers that aren't consistent. So I think vertical integration would be a big step towards that. And that's probably when we'll start seeing more capital come in.
Yeah, I don't disagree that that's a model that can work. I don't know that'll happen. I think there's other ways for capital to be infused in the market without total vertical integration. I think you can do it with, well, that too, but I think if you look at how do you make it work within the current construct of what's happening, how does the EPC and dealer model work? Because it's broken today. There's no question that it's broken. I think that the way it can work is with it. Number one, the salespeople have to be willing to be a W-2 employee, and that's just not going to happen. Not the way it's currently structured. And by what currently structured, I just mean the compensation structure is you can't ask. You're not going to get a sales guy to say, I can't wait to be a W-2 guy and make literally like a tenth of what I was making before. It can happen, but it's going to happen over time. It's not going to happen very quickly. I think that the faster way of making it happen is that dealers are willing to sign long-term agreements or partnerships with EPCs that effectively locks them in and creates what is vertical integration through horizontal integration. I think that's the better way of doing it. I shouldn't say better. I think it's an alternate way of doing it today that utilizes the chess pieces on the board without asking everybody to change. The model that you're suggesting, I think, can work and probably in the end will work, but I think it's going to take a lot longer for that evolution to happen, or else there's going to be, total destruction, and everyone has to go like, well, shit, I guess I'm going to do it this way instead.
I feel that though right now is interesting because so we have a lot of people coming into our platform. 95% of them have never sold solar in their life, and everyone that's been in solar, that's still in solar today, like I feel there's been a big fallout, obviously. So I feel right now it almost feels like the great reset of people that are coming in from the outside. And that's an interesting opportunity for whether it's W-2 or reducing salespeople commission to something healthy and give it to the installer, give it to the platform for survival. Because you get someone in that, okay, 3 years ago they made 10 grand on a deal, but now they make 3 or 4 grand. Hey, when did we leave a world in which 3 or 4 grand a deal is a bad job? That's still awesome, right? So I think right now is an interesting.
We left it when that became a $10,000 deal. That's when we left it.
Right. Okay.
Always harder to go backwards.
Right. Yeah. But they don't remember that. That's the cool thing. If you get all these new people that are coming into the industry, they didn't, they never made 10 grand on a deal. So they're not expecting that. And that opens up some interesting opportunities for sharing the margin across other places and keeping things healthy. But
yeah, I mean,
I don't know the actual numbers though.
Yeah, I mean, before I started my first sales org, my first dealer really, I was the director of sales in California for a company called Ion, and they are vertically integrated, and they don't have outside folks, but they're still 1099 reps, right? So in reality, you don't really call them vertically integrated if they're 1099 reps. The difference is they just they don't pay them the same in terms of the amount of money that's paid. They pay much less to their closers, but their advantage is that they have an army of setters that are providing them kind of a constant lead source. And so guys are willing to pay less if you can control lead flow. That's where, like in the end, like what you're advocating is, can I pay someone less money and change the economics of the stack? Yes, you can, so long as you're willing to pay for something else that makes their job less difficult. Guys going door to door get paid unconventional money because they do unconventional things. They go get dropped off in an area where there's literally no marketing done. They walk around with an iPad with no previous contacts, knock on someone's door cold and convince them to sign a $50,000 loan. Like that is a special individual or a special skill set. If you think about it, like how many people can get dropped in the middle of Topeka, Kansas and walk away the next day with a $50,000 loan signed with someone they met 2 hours ago? Like that's a very difficult thing to do, especially someone who wasn't even thinking about it, right? So is it fraught with some problems? Of course. And we need to sort those out. But unless you're willing to invest in creating the lead flow, which is precarious, then you're going to be paying people to do the unconventional thing, which is to go door to door, and they'll get paid unconventional money. I think that there's a way to solve it still the way it currently exists without disrupting too much. I think you have to change some of the economics. But I think what people are looking for more than anything else today is safety. They're looking for self-preservation, and they'd give up some of their profit for self-preservation. But even to your point about tech, I don't think tech is even sophisticated yet enough to really command high dollars. It still needs growth.
You think, I'm probably skipping ahead here, but in terms of Sunobi, and I also run a similar platform, one solution. So, in Australia, like I mentioned, all vertically integrated, awesome. We didn't have tech in Australia. Like I was on the tech side, I was probably the most advanced, but the stuff we were building was nothing, because it was, 10 years ago. Now, especially with the advent of AI, everyone's building tech and software. Some of it's great, majority of it's not. But do you think that there's a new form, sort of a master dealer platform model that could also be a solution to this? I think from what I gather, Sunobi operates sort of similarly to that. Approved install EPC backend, and you have the contract with the EPC, or is that connection with the sales directly on the front end?
Yeah, it's connected with the sales. I mean, that's an interesting point. I don't know if this is a video podcast or just an audio one, but as you're saying that, I'm kind of smiling and chuckling because something I'm building in the future is that very thing, is a platform. that I think is what's missing in the space. But to answer your question directly about Sunobi on a tech platform, Sunobi does not contract directly with an installer. That's a very sacred relationship between the installer and the sales org, in our opinion. And getting in the middle of that is a mistake. We feel like the tech platform's job is to transact a deal or to enable the sale, and that's what it should be paid for. It shouldn't be paid for creating a relationship and managing contractual obligations and covenants between installers and sales orgs. We stay away from that, and I think the history on some of the folks that have tried to do that has not been favorable for them.
It's definitely a heavy task, a heavy burden to bear. But regardless of whether that relationship is, do you think that's a model that could survive? Simply because of the aggregate nature of it, right?
Yeah. So I'm probably peeling the curtain back a little bit early on this, but it's not that it's, any idea that someone could copy quickly is not a great idea. It's the execution, I think, that really matters. And so let's talk about two of the things that are relevant today that are happening, and what's good about them and what's not. And again, 2023 was this magnifying glass that splintered and broke a bunch of parts of solar, and then it also augmented some other things in solar. When one of the bigger moves that happened was Sunder leaving Freedom and going direct to GoodLeap, right? So the platform that GoodLeap launched was what they're calling, Sales Direct or GoodLeap Direct. Either way, it's and the model effectively is that GoodLeap advocates, I'm going to help you vet the right installers that are safe, and I will bifurcate the payment so that you're not being paid directly from the installer. I'll pay you directly from the bank to the sales org. Well, as a sales org, that feels like a really safe thing to do, right? And I have great relationships with GoodLeap, and I love them. I think they're great. Here's the challenge with that particular model: you're stuck to GoodLeap. So in the event that GoodLeap is not competitive, you're now asking a sales rep to buy in on your product and maybe lose deals if it's not as competitive. GoodLeap has historically been very competitive and very good, and so there's a good chance that it'll always be great, right? But that's what you're giving up, is this optionality that exists. The other, and that's one side of it, right? The other thing that's happened in the industry that I think is really grown is, especially in light of probably their bigger competition and Titan falling apart, is that Freedom is expanding, right? Yeah. And they're big. They're a massive organization, the largest, if not one of the largest residential rooftop installers in the country. And so you look at what's Freedom offering that's so attractive to people. It's a homogenized sales experience and a homogenized place where all of the data of your sales, all of your install data exists in one place. And so you can go virtually anywhere in the United States and sell with the same platform, the same sales platform, the same install kind of platform. You get all your information from a similar source. And so it's easier for you in some ways to manage your business because it's all got this vertical integration sort of feeling. What's the downside? The downside is that you're stuck with Freedom, right? And so if Freedom is really good in one market, that's fantastic. But if they're not good in another market, it's hard, right? So again, I'm not saying that Freedom's bad. I think my point isn't about whether or not GoodLeap's good or bad or Freedom's good or bad. It's that when you choose a single option, you are tying and hitching your wagon to that single option's ability to perform. And because of how volatile the market's been, it makes people worried. So if you have a tech platform that can connect smaller regional installers, and you can provide the front end and the back end, the visibility of all the things that are homogenized about what people love about Freedom, but you can do it in the same place, but you have regional installers who are really good at what they do in their single location. And you can provide a safe place where the funds are paid out effectively. Then you've actually accomplished what both of those have tried to accomplish without having the miscues of a single option to be tied to. So I think that, to me, I think is a future that plays well, but you have to have a tech platform and the right executive staff to pull it off.
I
think that's the hard part.
Well, it is the hard part. Sounds similar to something I've been running since 2021. It is very hard, but the vertical integration of the operations. So a big thing for me, I run Sunivo, SUNIVO.com. That's the model that we have. The big thing for me on that side is, and I believe that's definitely a future, a combination of everything without being centrally attached to a specific installer or finance provider. So we have installers per state or per area and multiple finance provider integrations. And all of our users and sales people have all their systems and project management in one place, in one login. But I think it's very important to take it a step further. So one big thing that irks me with solar tech right now is, number one, it's focused on door to door, and number two, it's focused on proposal. And I think there's a big opportunity for a lot of people to add non-proposal features in their platforms. So sales specific things. For example, calendars, appointments, reminders, communication tools. So we have a dialer, a multi-dialer in our platform. We have texting. But I believe that model, like you described, and that I believe in as well, is an interesting model. It's not technically an EPC. It's not technically a dealer. It's almost like an interface. It's a decentralized interface that puts it all together. And it's interesting as well because it provides safety to the sales rep because of an escrow style payment commission split. And when you have dealers or individuals that are working with other dealers, that's really interesting as well, because you can have strangers working together, but minimizing the risk through an escrow style payment structure, right? Appointment setters and closers. And it's registered in the system. So when that settlement comes in for finance provider or EPCs, we know who to pay. But then also on the installation side of things, if you're an awesome installer and you're doing half of Texas for a platform like that, you have an aggregate amount of volume from all these dealers and sales guys that for you, it would have taken you a few years to build up 5, 10, 15 different dealers to get that type of volume. But then this platform can offer it you in a super centralized, universal way. And every single job pack is sent simultaneously and quality checked before it gets submitted. So I think that's an interesting model that I believe has a big piece in the future. It's why I've invested every single penny I have into Sunobi. So, yeah.
I agree with you. And I think that there is room for a lot of that type of product or that type of platform in the space. There needs to be some, so when I say, like, I don't think it needs to be vertically integrated that way, what you're describing is something you've been advocating, and I didn't even know I was describing a platform that you're doing as well. I think that is an answer to the existing model. And I believe in it very much. I watched as the company that I loved dearly and spent all my time trying to build at Coda fall apart. And it broke my heart. Everything about the failure of Coda was single-handedly the greatest professional disappointment of my life. And I gave everything I possibly could to that. And I think that there is, when I look at what I learned from there compared to what I wish I knew when I started, and marry that with the knowledge that I've gained by sitting in the seat that I sit at with Sunobi and talking with so many different CEOs of installers and working with their sales teams and working with their field guys and trying to figure out what the right things are to build and how what we are building is working and not working. When you sit in a place like that and you're looking over your shoulder at what happened and what worked and what didn't, what was effective versus what wasn't, and then again you marry it up with what you're watching happen across the country. The conclusion that I came to was that the fix in the industry is a platform that does that very thing. And you have to be compelling enough, both from a tech standpoint and an offering standpoint, that those entrepreneurial spirits who want to be their own fly their own flag and run their own company, but have been orphaned in the industry, feel confident enough to come home to a place like that and live on a platform where they can still exercise those entrepreneurial gifts they have within the safety of some confines that allow them to be safe. And that, I think, is part of the future of solar that will stabilize some things. And it also allows you, when you have that kind of leverage that you talked about, that kind of volume, that aggregated volume, it allows you to implement some things that have a greater effect on the whole of the industry than if you just do it with one single company. From a sales standpoint, all the way down to, that creates a different kind of leverage and different kind of power than just a single company, because you can affect so many so quickly, and especially if you're doing it for the good of the industry rather than for your own selfish interests. So when I say you have to have the right executives executing, not to use the word too many times, but you have the right executives executing and the right tech stack, part of that, in my opinion, has to be some altruism in who they are and what they're trying to do. Because if your goal is just, how do I get mine? And that's all you care about, inevitably what happens is you destroy the industry around you. Like the wake of destruction you leave doesn't leave behind anything that allows things to grow. And it's okay, in fact, to have more than one company doing the very thing you're trying to do. Like if I end up doing something that's in direct competition with Sunobi, I would celebrate and applaud your success no matter what, because it's needed. I won't be able to touch every single person in solar, nor will you. But if you can do some great things and change the industry in a way that improves where we are, and I can do the same thing, and 15 other people are doing the same thing, the industry can thrive. We just can't attack it with this, isolationist and scarcity mentality. We really do have to say what, and that means that sales orgs and installers both have to look at each other and go, am I making too much on this? Does this hurt you? Is this not favorable for you? And have to be willing to have a real collaborative discussion as opposed to what's in it for me all the time.
But even with that, if you, just to play a little bit of devil's advocate, we can raise red lines and we can do this. Doesn't mean the installer is going to use that money right. Still doesn't mean they're going to be in business 25 years. So like sometimes it's not, about, higher red lines, about, is that even a possible business for these companies to, have these, one, it's going to be one or the other. The margin's too small to stay in business, or the margin's too big to get business. So what is that balance? What is that answer? Is it just somewhere in the middle?
Well, I don't think that there's an argument to be made from a sales org standpoint to say that there's not enough margin for them. I think that argument has flown out the window a long time ago. Especially so, Elon Musk is quoted as saying something like, "You get paid commensurate with the problem that you solve."
Yeah.
And so you look at a sales guy and you're like, what problem you're solving? They're solving something that someone else isn't able to solve right now, which is generating business out of nothing. That's why they can command it. That's why the leverage exists. But there's another part that's important too, and that is that the person who holds the most risk is also entitled to the most compensation. And currently, the person who holds the most risk is the installer. And so at some point, the installer has to be willing to say, I get it, you're doing something that I can't do, or that's super hard and it's unique. I get that, and you deserve to make a lot of money. But I'm unwilling to pay you something that hurts me just for the sake of getting it. So it's not about whether or not an installer needs to make more margin just for the sake of making more margin. They need to make more margin so they can stay in business. Yeah. And because there's not a vehicle today, like, again, and I'm sorry for the rants and rambles I go on, but I think these things are important to understand the context where we're at in the industry. But, 2014, 2015, when things were really starting to take off, and 16, 17, things were starting to take off, and these lenders were, moving in, which up until then it was a lot of leases and PPAs, but the consumer finance product, that's when it really started taking off, was in 16, 17, and 18. And these companies that we've talked about, already named, Titan and Freedom and Ion and these guys like that, and Vivint Solar at the time, they've been in business for less than 2 or 3 years, which means for them to go get regular financing from a commercial institution like a Bank of America or Wells Fargo or something like that, to get like a real operating capital loan, doesn't exist, because they don't have 5 years of tax returns to show. So it was impossible for them to grow in a way that made sense. So they had to get money from a place like a lender giving them M1s to grow, which is an unhealthy way of doing business, because you're, for a lot of other reasons. But in general, there's not operating capital that exists. And so if a installer says, I want to be healthy, and they're saying that to a sales org, I can't give you this red line that low because it's not healthy for me. And they go, well, you don't entitle that kind of margin. To be like, well, I have to make sure that I can service this account for the next 25 years. And I have to hold at least a percentage of this money back in reserve to take care of these customers in 5 or 10 years so that you can get a referral. That means I need to hold back some money to make this thing effective and right. If a sales org says, I don't want to work with you, the installer has to have enough courage to go, that's okay then. Go somewhere else. Because that installer that chooses to do business with them, as we've seen all throughout, like, in case people don't know this, 50% of the United States solar industry went out of business in 2023, and 80% of California went out of business in 2023. That's a pretty sobering thing to look at, that if over 50% of the entire country went out of business, that means there's a fundamental flaw with the way the economics are set up. The math doesn't math. So if the installers aren't willing to say, I'm going to change the way this is done so that I can protect myself, and they're unwilling to stand up to a sales org who does what they're supposed to do, keep in mind. Their job is to sell, to convince people to give them what they want. Like, are we surprised that a sales org does to an EPC what we expect them to do to a consumer, get them to say yes? Like, of course they're going to get that. At some point, you've got to like go, hey man, here's the line in the sand. I'm not crossing that. And that's it. And until they do it, we'll continue to have some of these problems. But that's how you solve some of that, Joe. It's not necessarily that an installer is saying, I need more money for the sake of just having more money. It's, I need more money for self-preservation so that you can have a referral, so that I can take care of your customer. Then you can have more jobs. Like, if the salespeople believed truly that every deal would turn into 2 or 3 because they got a referral, they would take less money. But they don't believe that. And they don't believe it because they're not sure the installer is going to stay in business. So if the installer can prove them they're going to stay in business and take more margin for it so they can get referrals, you're now controlling your own lead source. And you get referrals. Now you have the closest thing to recurring revenue that this industry's ever had.
Isn't it also true that a lot of the installers weren't running their businesses the right way, where a company could come in, look at, oh, okay, this is running smoothly, just maybe a cash flow issue, we cash flow, and now we have a thriving business. It wasn't like that, right? A lot of the companies are like, whoa, there's nothing I can do with this business. I don't know what you guys are running. I'm surprised you've been in business this long. That kind of thing, right? So it's not always like how much money we're getting. It's like, what are you doing with that money, right? And how do you prove that to the sales team and to make sure that money is going to the right places,
It's a supply and demand issue.
Let me ask you this. How much money do you think installer makes gross profit on a per watt basis?
What, under $1, so what, 80 cents or something like that?
Like 30.
Yeah.
When I ask a sales guy, how much do you think an installer is making? They think the sales guy, they think he's making at least the same amount he is. The company's making the same amount that a sales guy's making. They're making like 30 cents.
That's crazy.
So then you go, well, why is your business set up that way? When I was trying to raise money for Coda, I spent a year of my life doing phone calls probably 4 times a week with different investment type of folks, PEs and venture capitals and loan guys and hard money guys and everything I could find to try and raise some capital. And across the board, they'd all say something like this. Why are you paying nearly 40 to 50% of your overall revenue to sales? That percentage is so out of whack. The rest of the percentages are not. Like, if you took those out, they're not out of whack. They're fairly okay. It's just that you're paying 40 to 50% of your revenue to sales commission. That's a substantial amount of money. So you're in that position because if you don't, and this is what I was getting at before, if you're an installer and you don't give that red line or that source to a dealer, what you're afraid of happening is they won't do business with you. Mm. So what you have to do instead is say to them something along the lines of, I need you to be in partnership with me. And if we make money together, I'll share the money with you in a way that's fair. But I need to make sure that we're protected. You can have an agreement like that where it's different, that creates more of a vertical integration type of a situation, even though it's contractually bound. But the sales org has to feel like that they're getting compensated fairly. And if the rest of the market is willing to give them more than what the guy who's being responsible is giving them, that's the issue. You have to have a collective effort of installers saying, like in California, I'm sorry, but if people are still giving a 225 in California as a red line, you're not going to make money. It's an unprofitable red line. But you end up having red lines that are advertised that are much, much less than that, even though they're baked with adders and hidden with things to kind of cover the cost. I would say this too, Joe. I don't know how many installers have really figured out their unit economics very well. In large part because I think that most of them are running on cash accounting as opposed to accrual-based accounting. Yes. And so they're not really quite sure what their cost is, and finding out, like, it's a moving target for them all the time. And so I think that if I were to give some advice to the whole industry about something they should do, the first person you should be hiring is someone who's really, really good at accounting, like a CFO or a director of finance who is really good at that and can kind of keep you in check. That's as important as your sales. And if they're not doing that, then you don't really know what's happening with your business. So I wouldn't say, Joe, that it's necessarily that people are foolish or they're dummies or whatever it might be. It's more that I think that from 2016 through 2022 almost, you could effectively run a business and make money on cash-based accounting or come close to it because you were making money on advances. Or not making money. You were living on advance. You're living on M1s that were being paid to you. And so you didn't really know. Like, no one was really, if nothing changed, the economy didn't change, then there was no way to really know that someone was not going to make it unless it was something really bad, like an installer did something like was embezzling money and, buying strippers and Coke or something, then that's the problem. But that's not the majority. That's like an anomaly, right? Most people are trying really hard to be successful, and they need to spend some time like making sure you have good accounting, a good CFO, make sure they're keeping you in check, and then spend a lot of time on your data to make sure you understand your unit economics. Then you can say, this is what my red line needs to be effectively. It needs to be an ongoing daily or weekly discussion about what you're doing.
I think the change in supply and demand and race to the bottom will completely flip this conversation on its head way sooner than we think it will. So 2023 was, from 2020 and 2021, things were a hockey stick, right? 2023 comes in and slows it down. But I think 2021 and 2022 were a good indication of where the market was going in terms of the customer preparedness. Utility rate increasing and more awareness of solar. I still think we're in a solar is a scam phase of the market where people just have a lot of bad publicity or bad stories about solar. They don't think about the potential benefits for themselves. So when they hear solar, they think product and they don't look into it further. I think that's going to tick over very, very soon into the adoption phase. I don't even think we're mass adoption yet. I think that's evident. It's 4% market penetration. Australia is 33% nationally. As soon as that ticks over and we have a bit of luck on reduction in interest rates and things happen, I think that's when the real boom starts. I haven't seen a boom in the US yet compared to Germany or Australia or even the UK. When that happens, especially because we have so many sales guys that have left the industry in the past few months, customers are now begging for solar at a 10x rate than they were previously. Installers are hard to come by, good ones that aren't going to screw you over. And now the conversation swaps completely. That's what we saw in Australia. Like I mentioned, I was begging good installers and I was throwing money at them. So we now are currently, sales guys have to go out there and fight for the deals. I think that's going to change very, very soon. I think good installers are going to realize that they're good and worth more. So they're going to start putting up their pricing if they need to. And sales guys are going to be okay with a lower percentage of the margin because the sales are going to get easier by any form of marketing. Sure. I truly think that's going to be a natural correction. How soon? I don't know, but I think that's.
You're right, and that will change things pretty quickly. And I think with the exodus of some of the sales guys in solar, the other ancillary part that will happen to solar is that these industries that are home improvement industries are colliding with solar at the same time. And you have HVAC companies and roofing companies and smart home companies and pest control companies and fiber companies and everybody else who's like, capturing the customer is what becomes the obviously most important part. And so if you can, again, partner with, rather than have vertical integration, but partner with some of these extra companies that creates lead flow for you, then you're not necessarily worried about paying the sales guys as much as you are worried about paying the right guy the right amount of money so that he can get referral after referral after referral from all these lead sources. So if you can, from a platform standpoint or a partnership standpoint with an EPC, create relationships with these other industries that touch home services and home improvement and customers, home customers, you can actually change the dynamic pretty quickly without it collapsing the space, right? Like in some ways, what I'm afraid of is that the collapse is so detrimental that there is not really a good recovery. And I don't think that, I think that Titan is, I do think that we kind of hit the bottom of the market in January, February, March of this year. I don't think that we've seen the last of the carnage of that, though. I think that there's probably another 4 to 6 months of bad news of companies that have been hurting for a long time, that have reached the end of the rope and they just can't hang on anymore. Even though the market's shifted, the cuts are too deep. It's like someone's got some wounds, they're hanging on, and you're like, well, you're not getting wounded anymore. Yeah, but the wounds have killed you. They got sepsis or some shit. So that's where we're at. And I think that when we can recover, or as we recover with partnerships with these other companies, these other industries, it's like triaging the problem to an extent. And we gain not only kind of a free lead source, but we can cross collateralize those and make it so that you can bring in, HVAC to your existing solar customers, or solar to your HVAC customers, or vice versa. And you need to have the right tech stack, and you need to have the right executives, you need to have the right partnerships to pull that off. And if you can do it, then I think that you kind of set the blueprint for what needs to be done, and it can be duplicated with other people in other markets in the country, and they can also be successful. I'm not advocating that for just me to be successful. I think it needs to be done a number of times, the number of people, to kind of save solar. I don't think solar's safe. It needs some of this. Someone like you and other people to go, let's be bold enough to do a different way, set some standards that are different than what's been set, and hold ourselves to it, because we believe in the future of it rather than the short-term gold rush bullshit that people keep talking about. Like, the more people that say this is the gold rush, get it while you can, you're just destroying the industry. Like, please get out. We don't need that. It's not helpful.
I 100% agree that the convergence of similar industries, or let me rephrase it how I like to say it, the convergence of solutions that solve the same problem for solar customers could be the saving grace for solar as it's in its downturn. And I also believe that software is responsible to do that, because salespeople in solar right now have no bloody idea how to size an HVAC system, understand energy efficiency upgrades, or all these other things. And so when you say, hey, add this on, or upsell or downsell, they have no idea, and they're going to screw things over. So I think software has maybe a bit of a responsibility, if they want to expand and get outside of solar only, to go, hey, for example, something that, again, we're launching in Sunobi very soon. A lot of people know this. Adding energy efficiency, full home energy efficiency, customized proposals based off of a bunch of different metrics of the property. But the reason why that's so cool and HVAC is so cool is because that is solving the same problem that solar customers need solved. And so on the sales side of thing, if you just expand your mindset up a bit and go, okay, what was I doing with solar? I was reducing people's power bills and usage. I was dropping their utility bill. Oh, cool. HVAC, energy efficiency, these things are doing the exact same thing. So now I just need a software that enables me to design a X proposal, HVAC proposal, or energy efficiency proposal, and go through the same sales process. But yeah, that's exciting. And I love that you said it. You've said 2 things in a row now. You're like pretty much explaining what I'm putting energy and time into. So similar mindsets for sure. What other industries are you excited about right now? And do you think that there's opportunity, what you're doing, either with Sunobi and other projects, to, help the sales or help the install get involved in those and help that, whatever the term is, congruence?
Synergy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I guess what I'm excited about most right now, if I was being specific about tech, is the thing that we've been chasing at Sunobi from the beginning is to have everything in one ecosystem. And I think that it's a really big mountain to climb. And it's a really daunting task. And again, I think that it requires the right kind of people to build it. And I would say if I looked at some of my competitors, that if you come at the sales space from an operational mindset, you're probably going to miss the mark. If you're a sales guy coming in an operational facility or operational tech platform from a sales perspective, you're going to miss the mark. So having like a group of people that can effectively build a tech platform that's one ecosystem is going to be a Herculean task, mainly because you have to have the right people doing it. It's not that it's about like who can code, or it's who's going to architect this in a way that makes the most sense for both people. Is the architect, because that's the course and charts the course from the beginning of what the end result's going to be. And once you're down the road in tech and you've architected something wrong, and you realize that it's not just like a quick fix, it's the full amount of time you spent doing it, you start all over again. There's no quick fix. It's brutal. That's what we call in the space technical debt. And so if you're holding a lot of technical debt, you're not as nimble as a company. You can't, adding modules. And so to your point, like, hey, I'm really excited about adding HVAC services to a proposal that can effectively show savings analysis for solar and HVAC. In order to do that right, you'd had to have started at the right place from the beginning and architected that intentionally from the beginning. If you didn't, trying to like piecemeal it on, ad hoc it on, is no different than just saying, well, why don't you just API to somebody else who's doing that and just bring the data in? But then now you're babysitting and managing an API integration, which is now it's really a service. It's not a tech innovation platform. And so I'm excited about the things that we're doing at Sunobi. I know they're going to take longer than everyone wants and longer than I want, but sometimes like really good things take a long time to build. But I believe what we're doing is the right thing. I believe that the thing that we're chasing, again, is to the comment I was quoting about Elon Musk, like you're compensated in correlation with the challenge that you've solved or the problem that you solved. And I think this is a big, big problem to solve from a tech, and it's exciting to be able to do it and daunting to take it on, but it's fun. I don't know. I got a lot. You asked me a really open-ended question, so I'm trying to control my thoughts here. But the other thing that we've been talking about, this platform piece, is the other thing that I'm just really excited about. I think that solves a lot of problems for a lot of people really quickly, just because it gives them a home and safety that they've been missing. But beyond that, I think the space as a whole has a lot of evolution yet to come, and there's things that are happening that people don't really know about because it's not like mainstream news and mainstream media. But there's people coming into the space from outside of solar who have been wildly successful in other Fortune 100 type of companies or industries that can quickly revolutionize solar, because it's not just like a trend or a fad. Like, it's a legit industry. And now you have people that have serious money. They're looking at it and going, hold on, like, we've already done this song and dance before in another industry. All we need to do is throw some money at this and change it this way. Like, why don't we do it like this? And it's pretty crazy. And some of the conversations I've been having and things I've been hearing about, are really an interesting shift in the space.
And with the platform model that we've been talking about, like, just so you know, so we started developing in November 2021 and launched January 2023. The reason we did it was purely because, so I own a virtual solar club with 3,500 solar sales reps, 28 countries around the world, a lot in the US. And we were just education and community. And they just kept telling us, we are getting screwed over by installers who are here. If only we had one place to go, right? And that was our inspiration, because there was a massive problem. And it was a problem then, and I think it's a 10x problem now. So it's a massive, massive problem. But I'm interested to know, and we've been going for a bit here, but I'm super interested to know, and are you looking at the direct-to-consumer model in terms of software at all? Do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, Yeah, that's another conversation that's been kind of bubbling around for a while. And I'm not as sold on it as I think a lot of people would think maybe I am because of tech that we're in. But here's the reason why. Cars as a whole is a much simpler purchase to make than solar because it's a singular product. Everyone already knows about it. It's been around since the turn of the century.
Exactly.
It's like, I mean, the amount of marketing that's done on cars, people aren't showing people's doors to sell them because they don't know about it. They're going to a place to go buy it. As a thought to keep in mind, like solar in this country is still something that's sold, not something that's purchased. That was your comment about supply and demand change. It's still a thing that's sold. So there's a handful of companies that have attempted to do like a direct to consumer model with solar, and it's pretty much failed. And it's not that I don't think it has a place or could work. I just don't think it's like a mainstream product yet. I think that people still want someone to come walk around their house, make sure the roof's not going to cave in. It's got too many moving parts. There's nothing that's automated about it. There's not like a single sort. We still don't even have like a single set of regulations on what's an acceptable electrical code or an acceptable permit standardized process across the United States. It's still, regional and based on jurisdictions. And so somehow to assume that someone's going to be able to like catalog all that, do it all in one place, and then the customer is going to say, "Oh yeah, this is simple. Let's just do it online and buy it and order it like I'm ordering my groceries." That's not going to happen. Like I think people are still going to say, I want to have someone come to my house and talk about it, and someone that I trust is more important. But if it was the case that that's where we're going, and the reason I'm going back to the car thing is to finish that thought, is that people can order their cars online, but they still go to the dealership to pick them up, and they still go to the place to look at them, and they still go shopping. They still want to literally kick the tires before they buy the vehicle. The first time we've had something that's been remotely successful to that is electric vehicles with like Tesla and, Rivian and things like that. Here's the thing about it though. You're not buying a generic off the rack car. You're buying a customized vehicle. It's not just the brand. You're going in and you're literally speccing out the product. You're putting down a deposit, and then you're going, I want this color paint. I want this color wheels. or this type of rims. I want this color seats, this kind of trim package, this engine, this, that, this, the other. You're going through all that stuff to make it specific to you. I mean, and you're doing that on a vehicle that everyone knows how it works. There's been 4 wheels and a steering wheel since the beginning, and everyone knows how that works. With solar, like, you think that we're just going to say, hey, Tesla, give me a 4, 8, or 12 kilowatt system. I'm just going to make that work, and we're just going to sell those in packs. It doesn't happen. Like, people still want a customized solution to fit their home and fit their needs specifically. And until that, I don't know. I don't think it's going to happen as quickly as well. I think that you can get some of that. I think you can have direct to consumer that can work. But I think what you're really doing is the direct to consumer is more like, I want to create a direct to consumer loyalty that someone buys my brand as an installer rather than they're buying solar. And then they trust that the brand is going to come to their house and do it. I think that is probably a more likely scenario of direct to consumer than a specific solar kit or solar system that you're going to buy with a piece of tech. That's a long way out.
I think that the tech is possible with automated system design, but the issue is exactly what you said. I use the term commoditized in this conversation, right? Solar is not commoditized. When's the last time someone asked a consultant to explain how a fridge worked? Decades and decades. They just go to the store, they buy it online, it arrives with their thing. Oh, that looks cool. It's got a nice machine, done. It's going to take a while for solar to get there. I trialed this in 2018 in Australia. I ran a direct-to-consumer little side brand called Cloud Solar, and the software wasn't anything special. But we had people that went on and actually ran finance as well and put deposits down. But what we realized, I think that was one of the first finance APIs in Australia as well, they got to the finance, they got approved, they even put a deposit down, but every single time, what did they ask? I need to speak to a consultant. I just need to speak to someone just to ask a few questions. But in order for us to actually get those orders and those deposits, we had to put our pricing so stupid low that they couldn't find it anywhere else. So now I have stupid low pricing and I have to pay a sales consultant now to talk to the customer and close them. So I don't think it's going to get here anywhere time soon until a customer has already had 2 or 3 systems, until they're totally above board and they get it. Okay, boom. Then maybe that'll happen. Or you're a Tesla and you have a brand new.
Just pay them less.
I actually think that the more likely scenario of direct to consumer is not the solar system, but it's batteries. I think that can be direct to consumer because you can find all your questions online. You can order that and someone can come install it because it's more like an appliance. It's more like something. And because batteries have a shelf life that's not as long as solar, I could see that as a model that comes out where people are like, let's do a lease only product just for batteries and we'll warranty those things for 50 years kind of scenario, and they're just paying a monthly payment for 50 years and they're getting a battery replaced every 10 years. And that's something where the more like, I think I just want to get into this, have a battery that takes care of my home and these types of things. That to me feels like it's a closer thing to do than solar on your roof and drilling holes in your roof and tying electrical stuff. I mean, that's way more involved than just tying in a battery.
Yeah, I think battery DIY stuff or direct to consumer will definitely be before solar installs for sure.
So before we go, Scott, I want to make sure everybody knows about Sunobi and how innovative the proposal software is and what it has been updated and what's different about everything, what's been new about it. But I want to make sure everybody knows how, like I was telling Josh before, this is one of the coolest websites I've ever seen. Like you guys really are amazing at software and graphical interface and making it look amazing. But can you just explain a little bit to the audience what separates Sunobi from other proposal softwares out there?
Yeah, I think there's two things really that really matter about a proposal software. One is that it's easy to use. I think that's number one. If it's hard to use and it's clunky and things like that, like you end up losing the customer. And by the customer, I'm talking about as a sales rep. Like our customer base is not actually homeowners; it's sales reps and installers, and so we're catering to them first. And part of what being easy to use means to us isn't just that it's easy to transact a deal, but that it's easy to educate a customer. And in this particular time, I don't think there's ever been a more important spotlight on consumer education and making sure that you're taking care of a customer's answers or questions and make sure you're answering them right. I'm sure you know this, but again, from a statistical standpoint, more than 50% of the jobs that are sold today cancel. It's a travesty. It's an absolute travesty.
Wow, that's fucking insane.
And so, if you look at that, my records are telling me that only 8% of jobs cancel past design approval. Right, which means that's really I mean, if you're looking for a reason why a customer cancel for something that's like, out of a rep's hands or out of an installer's hands, it's usually post design where the customer's like, this now created a new scope of work change that I don't want to approve, or the design layout that I'm not okay with. I'm not going to do that anymore. But everything before that, for the most part, can be solved at the point of sale or before then. And if 42% of the cancels are happening before that time, that's something that can be done at point of sale. It can be fixed at point of sale with proper expectations and proper education. So Sunobi has focused very, very heavily on making sure that objections can be answered, education can be provided in a way that's more instructive, easier to understand and see, and more robust for a consumer so that they get their questions answered. We're trying to add tools to the toolkit for the sales rep. So that's number one for me, is it's got to be easy to use, and that's what I mean by easy to use. Easy also means like fun and things like that, which if it's drudgery, no one wants to use it. So it needs to be fun to use. The other thing that's really important that Sunobi is focused on right now that I think that the industry desperately needs to is accuracy. If you're going to provide a proposal to someone and you're inaccurate on what you're presenting is going to happen, the whole downstream effect is wrecked. Like you've created a huge problem. So here's some other things I think you'll find surprising. Right now, like the number one platform that's recognized across the country as the most accurate tool is Aurora. Aurora does a great job from an accuracy standpoint. But for a company, I shouldn't say but, a finance company like a PPA or a lease has to bank on the production that's been provided because they own that system and they own the production values that are being presented. So when you look at this, the studies that have been done by like NREL and some of these other companies that people are getting data sources from are like maybe, well, let me see how close you are to this. How many houses do you think they did a study on to find out if the data was accurate? Right, like, hey, here's a data set. Let's find out how accurate our stuff is. Let's do it on X number of houses.
You need 1,000, right? You need 1,000 to get a good, at least.
The meteorological data for NERL?
I'm talking about the software companies that exist right now that they're showing their production, the data sets that they've used to indicate that they're accurate. It's less than 100. It's less than 100
per state or total.
No. Total, less than 100 homes.
Okay.
Wild.
Wait. So they're testing 100 homes, and how they're comparing it to other production values on NREL, or
they're testing 100 homes and saying, let's look at the production values of these 100 homes and see how accurate they are to what the proposal suggests it's going to be. How accurate is it to what actually happens?
Gotcha.
They did it on 100 homes. So that's a really, really, in any case study, that's a too small of a sample set in any way to like determine that that's actually an accurate result. So one of the things that we're doing right now is we have about 5,000 houses that have historical data of what actually happened, not what we think happened or not what the proposal that someone else provided. It's actual data from the source, from either SolarEdge or from Enphase or another inverter that's providing the data set. And so in order to get it, you need 12 consecutive months of production data to find out if that actually happened. And you compare that to what the proposal was that made it and compare to what reality is, right? So you can then go, I'm going to take a house. So let's take your house, Joe, and I do your proposal for your house. And you've had solar on your home for 5 years. And I take at least 12 months of historical data of consecutive 12 months of production values and compare it to my proposal. If I'm within some degree of variance, and I do that across 5,000 homes, I'm going to get a pretty good idea of how accurate my proposal is based on actual historical data.
Right.
So that's the project that it's a very nerdy kind of project to do, but I think it's really important, and
love it.
I want to be able to say with some moral authority that Sunobi is very accurate, so that people can say, I go to a home with confidence that the product that we're providing not only is the easiest, the most fun product to use and enables the sale the most, to the point where I'm getting 2 to 3 times more closes than the industry average, which, by the way, the industry average is 7 to 12% closes for every proposal. With Sunobi, if you just use Sunobi, not in the right way, you just use it, you're getting 17% close on your proposal. If you use it the right way, you're in the 20s, which means that we're double and triple the effectiveness of other proposal that's been out there. But if I can do that from the standpoint of not only is it fun and easy, but it's also incredibly accurate, where it's bankable by financial institutions that are willing to put their money behind it because it's a more robust study than ever been done in the history of solar. That's exciting to me because I think that it provides a level of confidence that the industry just doesn't have.
I also love that it's different how you charge too. Like you don't charge per proposal, and those numbers can go crazy even if you don't sell any deals, and now your numbers out of whack. So you're very innovative or you're doing it per watt base. Can you go a little more detail about that?
Yeah, that's scary. For you, that's really scary.
I promise I'll pay you, Scott. I promise.
No, it is scary. And to be totally fair, we're in the middle of an analysis with our data team to find out if we need to change it. Just because you can have some fraud, right? So our current model that's set up it's a success-based model. That's how we describe it. And it's that we only win if you win. So there's an impetus on our end to make sure that we're providing a product that's effective enough that if it can help you sell and close deals, we should be rewarded too. The other model that exists where you're paying for proposals, in essence, is essentially saying, I'm going to charge you every time you have a conversation with a customer. I don't know a lot of sales orgs that say, every time you have an appointment as a sales rep, I'm going to pay you. What they end up saying instead is, if you close a deal, I'll pay you. And more importantly, they say, if it goes to roof, I'll pay you. So we're trying to tie our success to the sales org's success as much as we possibly can. But I will say that I'm a little disheartened by, and it could just be circumstantial of the times, but I'm disheartened by the amount of people who want to use our platform and then transact somewhere else to avoid paying for it, which feels,
scary.
Anyway, just a cheat. So, but for the most part,
you don't have direct contracts with the EPCs, so you can't enforce the override on each deal.
No, we do. We have contracts with EPCs too. So an EPC can have a contract with Sunobi, and they provide the logins for the reps if they like. But sales orgs can do it as well and have a multitude of EPCs that they can put on the platform. Either way,
you have to chase up. It's the honor system, right? For the fees.
Well, we certainly know. Yeah, we bill them because we know if they've transacted, because they transact inside of Sunobi. They don't go somewhere else to transact. Now, what it doesn't mean is that someone couldn't. Someone could use Sunobi and transact somewhere else, and that eliminates our ability to charge. So, in some ways, yes, it is an honor system, and we chose to sort of chase the belief that sales reps and people in solar are genuinely good, honorable, and wonderful people. Might have to change that a little bit, but
isn't that running rampant in the industry right now, though? Isn't like a lot of companies going out of business based on companies not paying because they have no money? It's like this is trickling down to third-party companies.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, we're not immune to that. Like, we've seen a massive downturn in this year, and as a SaaS company, you check slightly different metrics. One of them is your churn rate. And when we look at our churn, over this last year, nearly 80% of all of our churn customers are churned because they went out of business. So that doesn't mean we've lost 80% of our customers. I just mean the customers that did churn, 80% of that churn rate is customers that went out of business. So it's a dramatic issue, right? I mean, we're trying as best we can to make sure that we maintain that belief set that we want to enable success and growth and be aligned with what they're successful with too. So that's, you pay us when you close, not when you use the tool. And I think that I still like to believe in humanity. I like to believe in goodness. And so there's a part of me that's like, I don't know if I want to change it just dig my heels in out of principle,
Yep. I got one final question. Josh, do you have anything else before I ask my final question?
I mean, I could talk software for 5 hours, so I'm going to have to cut myself off.
Well, Scott, one of the things I love about you is that you're very inspirational and motivational. And, I'm going to put you on the spot, but I think you are great on the spot here. But make believe you're the mayor of the solar industry and you have the whole community, in front of you right now. What message would you want to give everybody? It doesn't have to be your just genuine message to the industry about what's going on right now and what to look for.
The mayor of solar, huh?
You could definitely run for it for sure.
I'm not interested in politics on that, but I would say this. Number one, I feel like I'm right there with everybody at the same time, that I've had my teeth kicked in, and I've lost my business. I lost Coda. And like I said, it broke my heart. It still does to this day. Like I get emotional thinking about it. It makes me want to cry. It's a very, very lonely place to be when you're looking at the amount of people you hoped you could help and hope that you would meet all your obligations and you couldn't. It's a devastating feeling. and the amount of sacrifice and personal loss that happens, I don't think anyone, could possibly understand. And I don't say that to minimize anyone else's pain that's been affected by that with CODA, only to say that it is, I'm not obtuse to it. I understand it and I recognize it, and I feel a tremendous responsibility and sorrow for the amount of pain that's happened in the industry, because I've been feeling it too. I listened recently to a speech that Tim Grover gave, and Tim Grover, if anyone doesn't know, was the personal trainer for Michael Jordan, and he trained Kobe and Dwayne Wade and some other folks. He's been around people who were winners and that know how to dominate. And he made a comment to me that, or not to me specifically, but in the room, that changed my perspective about a particular principle that I think I've lived my life by for a long time. I grew up a bit of a cowboy, and there was a story about, that's told all the time: if you get knocked off a horse, you get right back on him. And so he made this statement. He said, "Has anyone ever heard the phrase, when you get knocked down, you get right back up?" And I immediately thought of that commercial of Dwayne Wade that says, "Fall 7 times, get up 8," And that was always like this source of inspiration for me. It doesn't matter how many times you get knocked down, you get right back up. And we are, as an industry, knocked down. We've been crippled. As I said, there's a lot of orphans who don't have a home, and they're wondering where they're supposed to go. But what Tim Grover said that was different was, if you get knocked down and you get right back up, you are the exact same person you were before. Nothing changed. Instead, if you get knocked down and you stay down for a minute until you've realized what went wrong, and you've resolved to change it, until you figure out how to change it, you don't get back up. So that when you do get back up, you're the very thing that people fear the most, which is you're different. And so as the industry is kind of reeling and trying to find out where to go and what to do, what I would say is, you've been knocked down. You've been beat up. So stay down for a little bit, as long as you have to, until you get up different. And when you get up different, you'll be so much better and so much more powerful and so much more divine than you were before, that you can change the course of your life and change the course of your solar history, because you've chosen to be different and got up and learned something than just getting up for the sake of getting up. So that's what I'd say is, rally in difference and learn and grow and evolve. But don't be afraid that you're knocked down. Look around, lick your wounds, figure out what you did wrong, and get up and be different.
Let's go. Beautiful message. The one and only Scott Hyde. Hey, before we go, if anybody wants to reach out to you, obviously definitely go to Sunobi.com just to check out the website and how innovative it is itself. But Scott, is that the best place, Sunobi.com, if they wanted to connect with you, social media, whatever else you got?
Yeah, I mean, our Instagram handle is Sunobi. I think you just search Sunobi, but I think it's Sunobi app. And then if you wanted to reach out to me directly, you can hit me on my email. My email is scott@sunobi.com. And I'm happy to help in any way I can. And if someone wants to tell me I'm a total POS, I'm happy to take that call too. So I appreciate you guys for having me on, Joe and Josh. It's been a great call. And Josh, it's great to talk to you for the first time and kind of listen to your mind. I feel like I found a kindred spirit. And if I can ever do anything to help or be of assistance in any way, and I'll certainly be reaching out to you, but I really appreciate your guys' time. Thank you.
Good man. Always appreciate talking to you, Scott.
Good to chat.
Scott Hyde, everybody. Let's go.
See you guys.
Peace.
Have a good one.